Hello, Milwaukee Bucks fans. Welcome back to Bucks Latest presented by Fan Arch. I'm your host, Dean Simon. Please consider liking, subscribing, and turning on those post notifications to stay up to date and in the know with all the latest Milwaukee Bucks updates. So, of course, this offseason in the summer of 2025, we've seen some pretty big name players return to franchises of which they were beloved, like Damian Lillard with the wave and stretch going back to the Portland Trailblazers, and of course, a guy that we'll get to a little bit later making his decision recently coming up towards the final year of his career. But we may see a third instance of this happening either throughout the course of the rest of this offseason or even going into next year and around the trade deadline because Chris Middleton, now writers are coming out and saying that it's not necessarily impossible to envision a world where the Bucks want to target a Chris Middleton return if he's up to it, if he comes to a buyout agreement with the Washington Wizards, or if he's uh, involved in a trade of some sort. Having Chris Middleton return to Milwaukee, it's not out of the realm of possibility. And specifically, Franco Luna from Fansided came out and said that, well, he stated pretty obvious things about Chris Middleton, about his tenure with the Bucks that would make him an attractive option to bring back and to have return. And he said, for example, Middleton spent the best years of his career as an indispensable part of the roster that delivered the franchise's first championship in 50 years. His clutch shots, playoff heroics, and chemistry with Giannis Antetokounmpo created memories that still define Bucks culture to this day. So it absolutely goes without saying that the storybook ending of a mid-season reunion would generate the kind of emotional energy that playoff runs are built on. End quote. And while he is right that the emotion and energy and things of that nature that aren't necessarily thrown into the box score that can't be quantified, those things definitely do help a playoff contending team in a high octane playoff atmosphere and could maybe help a team edge out a win in a close postseason game. But Luna would also go on to say that the on court product, the actual efficiency at which players operate on the court, is also something that heavily matters in a playoff setting. And there may be some doubts cast about Chris Middleton just due to the injuries and just his lack of appearances on the court. But I would argue that Chris Middleton, while he was dealing with a million injuries and he just could not stay on the court, and when he would play on heavy minutes restrictions. He wouldn't start. He was still pretty efficient for the time that he did step onto the court for the Bucks, at least this past year before he was dealt to the Wizards. He was still hovering around 50, 40, I want to say 85, 86 splits, though it was only on about, 12 points a game, maybe 9 shot attempts. Chris Middleton was still extremely efficient, and he remains as one of the NBA's most underratedly efficient players at on high volume in the NBA. And of course, with age, with the injury, it's going to make things a little bit more questionable if the Bucks actually entertain a Chris Middleton return. But I would say that it really isn't out of the realm of possibility for a guy who we again, like Luna stated, we know how he meshes with Giannis and how he is the perfect counterpart to a Giannis Antetokounmpo type player, where you just need that high volume scorer that can take on the brunt of the offensive responsibility when the game gets tight and you need shots to go in the basket. You give the ball to Chris Middleton and you get out of the way. That's exactly who you need on this roster, and I feel like as of right now, who would take that responsibility if you're just thinking about the current roster construction, as of now? Of course, the offseason's not wrapped up yet, but heading into 2025-26, with the makeup of this current roster, who is taking on that responsibility? Will Bobby Portis, become one of the most efficient bench scorers or scorers in a reserved role in the NBA? Will Bobby Portis maybe step up as a more elite shot maker in certain moments like that where important, hotly contested playoff games get tight? Does he step up? Does Cole Anthony, a guy that's proven to be a pretty great scoring option, though he's an undersized guard and he hasn't been super efficient throughout his career, maybe he steps up and he proves that he can be more consistent? Right now, it feels like that role is kind of vacant, and Chris Middleton could definitely step back in and at least assume part of it because the Bucks, while they were able to re-sign a bunch of guys like Gary Trent and Torian Prince and of course Bobby Portis and still have AJ Green, Kevin Porter Jr., Ryan Rollins, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for certain guys to kind of step up and stake their claim in the rotation as guys that could be relied upon in big moments. And if Chris Middleton were to return in this hypothetical scenario, he could at least take back a little bit of that responsibility. But moving forward, a guy that, may or may not find himself a little bit more of, chunks of minutes throughout the season with the Bucks, Tyler Smith. Of course, he wasn't able to throw a rock in the ocean in the summer league. He could not hit a shot. He connected on, I want to say, about 20% of his threes. It just was not a good going for Tyler Smith in the summer league. But one thing that I was really happy to see with both Tyler Smith and the coaching staff for the Bucks main NBA team and the Bucks summer league team is that they really wanted to throw Tyler Smith through the ringer on defense because he has a lot of untapped potential on that side of the ball and just as a pure two-way threat because he's incredibly agile for his 6'11" frame. He's got long arms and he's really athletic and he has all the tools to be a great defender at the NBA level, but it's just about him being able to move his feet quick enough, have the quick enough reactions. And of course, that's kind of the big thing with a lot of guys that are his size and that want to develop the capabilities of defending out on the perimeter. And the Bucks coaching staff, they really wanted to kind of throw him into the fire and get him to defend some of the opposing team's best players on a night to night basis. And this was something that the Bucks assistant coach Spencer Rivers told the Athletic for a recent article where he said that Tyler Smith was thrown onto Naquan Tomlin of the Cleveland Cavaliers in one of the Bucks 5 summer league games. So he said Tomlin uh, well, actually, before he got into Naquan Tomlin, he said, first of all, we wanted to challenge him. We wanted to challenge Tyler Smith on the defensive end. Then he went into saying that Tomlin, the kid on the Cavs, is a really good player, really good G League player as well. Pausing the quote, he averaged about 20 points a game, 8 rebounds on about 54% shooting this past year in the G League. So he really is a very skilled G League player, hasn't shown much at the NBA level. But, anyways, really good G League player as well. So we purposely put him on Tomlin and told him this is a challenge for you. This is development for all of us. We wanted to see if Tyler can turn the ball, pick it up full court, play more of that wing position. And Tyler Smith playing as a three, it's something that he could possibly look forward to if he were to hit more shots and actually carve himself out a spot in the rotation. He would be slotted in as a small forward, I believe, in certain instances, just because of his catch and shoot ability and his underrated ball handling. But on defense is where the main challenge comes in because the Bucks coaching staff wanted him to pick up full court, which he did. They included clips in the article from The Athletic where these statements are from, and it's him picking up Naquan Tomlin and just staying on his hip, trying to move his feet. And I think the biggest part of Tyler Smith's defensive showing in the summer league is that he was able to stick with guys that were somewhat smaller than him and maybe quicker than him without using his hands. A lot of guys will hand check to kind of use it as a defense mechanism to slow down a guy if they think they're getting beaten. And Tyler Smith was able to move his feet in a very solid manner where he didn't have to put hands on guys to kind of hold them back, as you'll see a lot of forwards and centers do with guards on the perimeter. If their guy gets a step on them, they'll kind of throw him a chicken wing and try and slow him down. But Tyler Smith was able to move his feet. He was able to just put body in front of body and stay right in front of his guy. And you saw that a lot with him guarding Naquan Tomlin in this sequence. So this doesn't necessarily correlate to him being able to guard some of the best in the NBA on a night to night basis. Of course, Naquan Tomlin's one of the best in the G League. He had a phenomenal year last year. But if Tyler Smith wants to make a spot for himself in the Bucks rotation at the actual NBA level, he'll have to take what he did in the summer league and increase it tenfold because the competition is only going to get harder and more athletic at the next level, of course. Anyways, Andre Jackson Jr. was a pretty big disappointment in the summer league, and it's not even because of anything that he overtly did in a negative way. It's just because he didn't take shots. Of course, he was pretty impressive on the defensive end, and that's kind of his makeup. He, like Tyler Smith, has all the tools in the world to be a great defender on the wing and stick with players and guard maybe 1 through 4. But Andre Jackson Jr. just would not take shots. And of course, this was seen and reported upon by a bunch of Bucks guys. And Finley Cool and the guys over at Brew Hoop for SB Nation, they came out with their rankings or letter grades for certain players in the summer league for the Bucks, and they gave Andre Jackson Jr. a pretty big uh, shellacking, a little explanation as to why he was such a disappointment in summer league. So they said that Ajax was the biggest letdown of summer league for the Bucks. As a third-year wing who has started 51 NBA games, he was supposed to play a step above the inferior Vegas competition and get shut down after a couple of games. Instead, he rode the struggle bus, averaging just 5.5 points along with 2.5 turnovers while taking a concerning 3 field goals per game. His scoring aggression was non existent, and as his unthreatening offensive game is the main thing holding him back, that was frustrating to see. This could not have been, it was like they took the words out of my mouth. Andre Jackson Jr. was supposed to come into the summer league and act as a player that, maybe he's not necessarily so much better than the rest of the field, but he has a level of seniority, being a guy that was placed in the Bucks rotation for a good while. He has that experience at the next level. You would expect a guy like him to come in, dominate, and then sit out because he has that experience, and you would like to believe that he is that kind of player that is performing well at the next level, that it feels like maybe he's past the summer league, or he's not really meant to be there, but he's just there for cardio in the summer. But it was completely the opposite because he just refused to shoot. And of course his all-around game was still pretty impressive. His defense was still pretty great, but it's just that he did not shoot. And while he did shoot, like he maybe took, I don't know. I want to say maybe a handful of threes in the summer. I want to say like 6 or 7 threes. He probably hit more than half of them, but he's not going to, his role at the next level is not going to be as, let's say, like a corner 3-point threat. He was a more impressive shooter this past year, but with his athletic gifts, that's just not where you want his career trajectory to go. You would think that he has a lot more areas to fill on a court than just being spotted up in the corner or in the dunker spot or wherever. Andre Jackson Jr. has, again, tools to be a much more versatile player at the next level, and seeing him get shut down in the summer league like this, it kind of casts a lot of doubts upon his future and whether the Bucks will take advantage of pushing that guaranteed date on his contract back to maybe waive him and open up some more financial flexibility, open up a roster spot, and maybe bring somebody else in. Anyways, lastly, a pretty widely known Bucks target, as it was reported by a good number of sources that the Bucks were very interested in acquiring Chris Paul this summer. He decided to go back to the Los Angeles Clippers for the final year of his illustrious NBA career. I believe he'll be going into year 21 next year. I'm pretty positive at 40 years old, and obviously what a career it has been. It would have been pretty amazing to see him and Giannis play together in any stretch. Of course, he's far past his actual prime, of which he enjoyed with the Clippers and with the Hornets earlier on. But the Clippers is where he was able to compete the most before Houston, and it's pretty interesting because with the amount of interest that was reported for the Bucks, you would think that the wider NBA sphere would be more into the idea or convinced by the idea that Chris Paul could really affect winning in Milwaukee. But it just seems to be the opposite. It seems as though the wider reaction to the reports of Chris Paul potentially going to Milwaukee were inherently negative. And of course, there was the spat this past season between Chris Paul and Giannis. Maybe they don't like each other. Maybe that factored into the Bucks' decision to maybe not pursue him as aggressively. But as I've said in previous episodes, the pure basketball fit of Chris Paul and Giannis Antetokounmpo on the floor just can't be denied. And if Chris Paul was in his prime and was pairing with a 30-year-old smack dab in the middle of his prime Giannis Antetokounmpo, nobody would be able to stop them. But of course, with this iteration of Chris Paul, he would be helping out the bench. He'd be tutoring guys like Ryan Rollins, like Kevin Porter Jr., trying to impart some sort of playmaking wisdom onto them and defensive wisdom as well before his time was up. But it's not to be. Chris Paul goes back to the Clippers, and now the Clippers have built one of the most dangerous teams in the Western Conference. They're so unbelievably deep, and they really could be a Western Conference Finals team going into 2025-26. Age and injuries will be a factor, But, you really can't think otherwise as to, this team isn't just not going to perform. Of course, with bringing in Chris Paul, bringing in Bradley Beal, two guys that, while Beal's contract wasn't necessarily the best thing in the world. He was on the worst contract in the league. He still performed at a very efficient rate. He was still a pretty good scorer, and he can still obviously help a team compete. Bringing in Chris Paul, bringing in Bradley Beal to replace Norman Powell and John Collins as well, along with Zubats in the front court. The Clippers just have an unbelievably deep team, but you have to think that the Bucks maybe missed out by not bringing in Chris Paul. But anyways, that'll be it for me today. Thank you very much for watching another episode of Bucks Latest presented by Fan Arch. I've been Dean Simon. Again, make sure to like, tell me what you think in the comments, subscribe, and turn on those post notifications to stay up to date and in the know with all the latest Milwaukee Bucks updates. See you guys in the next one, and go Bucks.